This is Jake with the Tattoo Improvement Network. Be sure to join us January 22nd through 24th in Austin, Texas for the Star of Texas Tattoo Art Revival. www.golivefast.com for all the info that you need.
All right.
Welcome back! Just in case.
Welcome back to Fireside, the premier tattoo podcast of the Tattoo Podcast. Blah.
Thank you. Thank you for
guys.
tuning in.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Oh, what the hell?
Oh, no.
I've never been here before,
I've never actually.
but I've heard my name.
I've heard my name here. I don't actually know what to do with my hands.
Got a big old itch in my ear.
Hey, Happy New Year's! Actually,
Happy
from
New
the
Year, and
Fireside
thank you, yeah.
Happy New Year.
podcast. We're here with Jimmy Tightpants, and you guys, our audience knows you well because we've
talked about you.
talked about you. Yeah.
I like the
I'm
throwback.
sorry.
I like the throwback Grizzlies, by the way. That's
Yeah. They feel,
Thank you.
they look and feel like the throwback Grizzlies in person these days. Yeah, they're like the Grizzlies of old.
Do you remember how you got here?
Unfortunately,
The Grizzlies of old.
they are the old
A lot of
Grizzlies.
old people.
Yeah.
But they're good, real good old people.
Yeah. Oh well. Yeah, it's a long season. We'll be fine. I feel like
we'll do fine.
We'll be fine.
Yeah.
All right, let me get some business out of the way. So, if you've never been here before, this is Fireside Tattoo.
Tats.
First off, shame
You've
on
been
you.
here.
You've been here.
You didn't know it.
This is the official podcast of the Tattoo Improvement Network, and you should go to tattooimprovement.com and sign up for our newsletter. Keep up with what we're doing. We have a lot going on coming up. This episode is sponsored by something, either the Austin,
It's
either
gotta
the
be
Star
Austin
of Texas,
And,
And,
with
uh,
Marcy and her
Marcy Mulkinson.
soon coming convention.
Yep, it's a very soon convention. It's like
I don't
3
know what that
weeks.
gesture meant.
Yeah, soon coming.
Soon.
I don't know if Marcy watches our show,
You're right.
but I just said her last name.
It doesn't matter.
Thanks.
Star of Texas. You know you love it.
Mulkinson. That's her last name. So, anyways, it might be sponsored by
Marcy.
Star of Texas. It might be sponsored by Space City, which should be fun. It's the first annual Space City Tattoo Convention.
Huntsville, Alabama.
In Huntsville, Alabama, and it's coming up soon. And if you're anywhere in the area, there are a ton of good tattooers in Atlanta, and a lot of people that follow us. I know in Atlanta because I hear from you guys. And Huntsville is not that far from Atlanta.
It's so close.
Come see us.
Plus, I'm going to the Space Center. I'm there. There's no way we're gonna have a good time.
Absolutely. Are you going to that?
No,
No, you can't.
Oh, I see.
I'm not allowed to.
Oh, you're not convention worthy yet.
No.
Well,
I gotta earn that.
We can take
Okay.
some photos for him though.
Oh, photos.
Tell
That
me all
sounds
about
good. Videos. Yeah, video. Right.
I'll get him some cards.
Some cards. Yeah, you should give him a T-shirt, some cards. Follow us on Facebook, Fireside Tats, Instagram at Tattoo Improvement,
Like us. Thumbs us up.
Twitter. You can really follow us on any one of those things, and the same shit goes to all three
Yeah,
of them.
that's right.
So don't follow us on all three, because then you're just going to get the same things over and over, like 3 times.
No, you really should.
Okay.
And send some emojis or something.
Send us some emojis. Yeah.
Cat face, hard eyes,
Yeah, right,
emoji,
Right.
umbrella, raindrap.
Crying poop. Oh yeah,
Deadpool emojis.
Did you say that just to get me fucking ticked off? I like the trailer more and more. I still hate the
Deadpool.
actor,
Yeah. Oh, Ryan Reynolds.
but
Thought you loved that guy.
god damn it, looks better and better and better.
Well, we'll see, I guess.
Well, you
When
don't
does it
have
come
to
out?
see
He
his
said
face.
this may be his saving grace, and it may be true.
Oh.
He's right.
And that's a good thing to see. You're passionate about something instead of the rest of your life. You're passionate about this thing. Well,
good.
finally, thank God.
Good. I hope he forces you to do a 180 on him, and you show up one day and go, God, I love Ryan Reynolds.
That's saying a lot.
Yeah.
It's
gotta
not
be a good movie.
but
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen some good stuff. Even the matte kind of skin to Colossus, and it looks pretty good instead of the old shiny. Like he looks like he's just casting. This. It looks pretty good. No, I'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah,
I'll see if
definitely.
is it Banty humor brings me back.
Yeah. All right. This is the New Year's episode. Like we said, Happy New Year's. from
What
Fireside.
are we talking about? I have no
I thought
idea.
since Jim was here, and we've talked a lot about
Jim
and about apprenticeships overall.
In general.
Here's everything I know about pizza
And
cats.
he knows a lot about pizza and cats. So
I
we'll
think
talk
we've
about that.
maybe have mentioned that too. He has a fond, it's maybe an addiction to pizza, really.
Some
It's
pizza
not healthy.
tattoos.
It's not healthy.
Well, we
But
podcasted
if-
with the official pizza tattooer, Sean Patton.
Official?
He started
Is
the
he pizza
pizza.
tattoos?
He
Thank you.
started the pizza tattoo, whatever you want to call it.
And you are growing up in that,
Yeah.
that glow.
It all started with Sean, and he does some nice ones. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about Jim's experience so far. I mean, this is your first turn of the new year as a
true.
tattooer.
Yes.
You've done a handful of tattoos now.
Yes.
You've done a lot of tattoos on pigskins,
Yes.
and you've done
We
a
talked
ton of
about that
drawings.
often.
Yeah, you've done a ton of drawing. So thought maybe we would get an idea of how you feel up to now, where you're struggling, where you feel like you're making
he's
some
struggling.
breakthroughs, some
love
ahas
the
here and
struggle.
there. There was Scott. You pointed out to me yesterday someone that made a comment on an Instagram post, and I thought it was interesting. And I forget it was a guy that wanted us to take a look at his portfolio or some flash, and he said, "I just stumbled onto the podcast not long ago. I've watched almost all of them. You guys answer all of the questions I feel like I can't ask." That's what stood out to me.
Love
I feel
it.
like I can't ask, and I think that's so. For whatever reason, that's really common. People feel like they can't ask certain questions during their apprenticeship. They don't know how to ask questions or whatever it is. But the way he worded that, I was like, yeah, that's weird, but that's absolutely true.
So I think some people have an inner list of things that are bothering them, but when you bring them to a person, maybe they're belittled by it. You're like, oh, that's such a small problem. How could you be having that problem? When in fact, you should have a list of fucking things that you should be asking all the time.
Right.
And because I promise you, they will not get answered unless you ask them. Often you think that you will figure these out one way or another. Oh, I'll do this. But if you don't know the systematic problem, if you don't know why that's the problem, well, how would you know the answer? How would you be able to figure it out? Or make even like quantitative, like A, B, C answers to try to fix things. And that's what I hope.
Yeah,
we
you may
do all
not.
the
Yeah,
time.
you may not know the question to ask, but until you start probing and asking questions, you'll
We've
never find out
actually
the
talked
question
about that too. It's like, how do you, when you're going through an apprenticeship, things do not happen until they happen. Things are not a problem until they're a problem, and so that's when you should be asking, not a day later, not a week later, not a year later. That's when
Right
you're like,
then.
"Whoa, I can learn something from this. I can learn something."
Yeah. Do you feel like in this apprenticeship? Of course, I'm putting you in a weird spot because
you're fine.
your mentor is right next to you, so you're not going to tell me any
I'll
of the
just
things
close
that he's
my
doing
ears.
wrong. But what if? Do you relate to that at all? Someone that has been tattooing a long time that says like, you answer a lot of questions that I feel like I can't ask, or
No, I could see that perspective just because if I know that David has told me something already and I've forgotten it, part of me sitting there thinking if I just keep working for a second, I'll figure it out. His voice will pop up in my head and tell me the right thing to do. And every now and then, like when you're working on a new tattoo and you're kind of fresh to it, it's really easy to lose track of time. You don't realize how long you've been doing something wrong.
Right.
And, what you thought was 15 minutes has been 45 minutes or an hour. And you're just like, geez, I've been wasting a lot of time dealing with this when I would have been better off asking. But you don't realize it until it's too late. It's a hindsight's 20/20 sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there thinking, I should be smart enough to do this instead of just going to the first thing, because at this stage I'm working on people. I have to ask those questions first because I'm deathly scared of screwing something up on someone.
Yeah,
And so I try to pick out things that are a little bit easier for me to do, stuff that I think will be challenging but that I'm definitely capable of. But I try not to bite off way more than I can chew. Maybe I have a little bit of trouble gauging that, but I'm trying. I'm
I
keeping
think
it in
it's
mind.
hard to gauge especially when you move two people. Speaking of moving two people, what has been the biggest transition there? Because you've gotten where you're pretty confident in working on skins, working on pig skins. Ish? No?
Ish. Better.
Better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still nerve-wracking, but I just sit there and try to go in with a clean head, and I try to retrace a stencil that morning and then just get used to the motions and think about the approach that I want to take to it, how I want to attack this particular drawing, because the line work is what I end up
like hearing attack, by the way.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to stop.
Oh yeah.
But
That's what you should do.
not tonight. But I've heard it plenty.
Attack.
You know.
Right?
But
So-
it's just finding a place to start and then figuring out where to go from there. And I know that like a lot of it's just trying to get the lines on as fast as I can so I don't have to worry about losing the stencil. But at the same time, I want those lines to be pleasing, and I have to be able to accept the fact that those first lines may not be great lines, but I have to mean every single one of those lines. All of those lines have to have intent. And I have to tell myself to slow down because whatever drawing instruments I'm used to using, this is not that. The machine operates in a completely different way, and everything that I've grown up using ever works differently. So I'm used to making marks in a certain way, but when it comes to that machine, it's just something I probably will not get used to for a good while. I've been working on it for a bit, but it's still nowhere near enough.
Yeah.
And so it's just a matter of getting that time in and just doing it and getting it out of the way. But along the way, I don't want to screw up. So, yeah, there's still that pressure, and I'm trying to be relaxed. And at the same time, I'm tense. And so I just go between those two feelings.
Yeah. Do you feel like the transition to working on people from skins, do you feel like just you feel like you have to comfort the person that's there and convince them that you know what you're doing when you don't think that you do know what you're doing? And do you find yourself in that position a lot where you're like,
Yeah.
oh, this isn't going well, but I can't ask anyone because I don't want this person to know that I don't know what I'm doing? Do you find yourself in that much?
There's a little bit of that, and at the same time, you have to know when to raise the flag. And I really want to make sure I'm doing no harm whatsoever. And so that's the most important part. So if I think I'm going to screw something up on someone, I will definitely stop. Will I ever tell you that? No, but I'll put it in a very nice way. I've worked in a lot of retail. I've worked a lot of different jobs where I had to work with people. I taught art for a while. I taught visual art in elementary schools for like 3.5, 4 years. Like, I've been around the block. I've done all kinds of stuff. And I'm just too dang old at this point to screw up that badly because it's going to set me back that much more.
I agree.
Like, I'd rather just do the right thing.
And to be aware of your, like, say, not shortcomings, but what
My
you can and cannot
limitations.
do, your limitations.
Yeah.
And that's a future goal. Like, this is something I cannot do now, but I can do in the future. And to show them what I can or can't do now and then work toward that goal, I think is a
Absolutely.
wholly acceptable thing as far as an apprenticeship and
It's
stuff.
being realistic.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially with who's
In
you're
all of
starting.
Right.
The first people you work on should be wholly obliged. They know that you're starting in this field,
Right.
and they need someone that won't be that controversial figure that just blows up in their face. You don't need a firecracker the first couple times you're working, you know.
But at the same time, I'm not going to put anything out that I can't be proud of in one way or another. So, like,
And I think you found that. I hope that in the first drawings that you've done, they're all your drawings. They're wholly your drawings on people that you can be accountable for, and you can be wholly accepting. And like, this is my art form now. I hope.
Yeah.
You know. I don't know if that's true or not, but have you found that being able to do your own work, even at this point, on people that you're working on, because I've had them do flash sheets and other stuff, and build up each person that he's working on is actually a new design that you've come up with instead of doing a flash piece or something that they've brought in or anything like that. And I think that could make a difference for a lot of artists.
I mean, a lot of it's been custom stuff so far. I've had a couple of things that were
work in a custom shop.
Right. I've done a couple of things where I didn't have to do too much to it, and that puts a little bit of relief off of me because it's just a matter of copying the shape. But I don't mind that. Way back when I was, in school for illustration and getting freelance jobs, one thing I hated really was contracts. But the second thing was I felt like I was doing this work that was kind of empty. It was stuff that I wasn't really that invested in. I was doing stuff for, papers around town and stuff about real estate, and it just wasn't that satisfying. But when you're putting it on someone's skin and it's going to have that sort of permanence and it means something to them, I care a little bit less about the work I'm doing, and I care a little bit more about the joy that it brings to that person. And so if we're able to make a compromise and I feel like I can put something on someone that I'm proud of while at the same time makes them happy, then I am fine with that. And so it's more about just replicating the look that I want, getting whatever ideas in my head on that skin as close as possible. And whatever the subject matter is, if it makes them happy, I can be stoked to draw it.
Good.
What have you found as someone you had an art degree, you've done a lot of illustration. You had a style in my mind that lended itself to tattooing pretty well from the start. What have you found were the biggest changes that you've had to make in the way that you put drawings together to make tattoos?
Oh, the number of lines. The number of lines, because I did a lot. I really love lines, and I love using lines as textures. And I love using lines to describe things as shape. And I know that with hatching and cross-hatching and little feathery lines, it can be very, very difficult, because especially, like, I really love drawing portraits. But if you put too many lines in a face, it's very easy to either make someone look like they're old or make them look like they're really hairy. And so you want to avoid that stuff. And my favorite thing to do would be hair. And typically when people say, like, you're drawing or painting hair, you're not supposed to do every single little line. I would do them. I would sit there and do them. I remember drawing a self-portrait of myself. I had a buzz cut. I put in every single hair in my head and tried to make sure that, and I worked a lot in photography too, so I took my own reference photos. In a way, I was trying to do hyper-realism in some areas and then stuff really graphic in other areas and use the same line weights and keep it consistent. And so I really tried to convey that sense of light, but when it came to the faces, I would always want to make them very flat, just because you don't want to misrepresent that person and make them seem like they're older, because with portraiture, people take offense to that really, really quickly. But you still want to get those textures in there somehow. And so everything was focusing on these tiny little lines that were really kind of thrown in as value. Because a lot of working in pen and ink and that sort of thing, or brush and ink, it's an optical illusion. You create that value, create that space through hatching, stippling, whatever, but it doesn't translate to tattooing the same way, because the tools don't work the same. And all the stuff I can pull off with a brush, I can't pull off with a machine. You sit there and you have to mold and carve each little line to make it look like a brush stroke or, whatever. And so it's getting used to working on both sides of the line, much like we were talking about Illustrator earlier, where you're working with a vector and one line ends up being a whole bunch of points along a curve on one side and another. And so it's really thinking about both sides of the line to create the shape that you want.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great observation from, especially even when you start tattooing in, you cannot use a lot of linear form. You have to do a lot of shading. You cannot put a lot of lines in, or it ages the figure almost instantly. They look like aged lines. They create a different effect. What that does lend to, though, is, like we've talked before, is not that recent, like, kind of resurgence of, like, etching style and stuff like that. But you have to be perfect with the line weights and stuff. And that's something I think your style lends to later when you get that graphic element. But it's one of those learning the line first, and that's what I think. A line weight is probably the most important part of that.
Well, I will say equally as important, because I can't knock it down a peg or anything, is the spatial relationship between lines and how they interact with each other. With illustration, it was always a big deal, but it wasn't that big of a deal. And honestly, that's something I always struggled with in school, is that I couldn't figure out how to separate lines. I didn't mind them being blurry when I was creating textures and values with them, but in tattooing, it doesn't work the same way, because as you heal, everything just becomes a mess anyway. So it's really figuring out how close can you get a line, and how can you shape those lines? How can you make those lines interact with each other? How can you have them, converge and, tell you this, that, and the other? Like, you should know that, like, a lot of diagonal lines create tension, especially where you have lines crossing. If you have a horizontal line, it's usually conveying something that's more serene, and then if it's a vertical line, it should be something that shows strength and that sort of thing. And so it's just all about how you want your lines to converge and collide,
and that's what happens,
and push the eye through the composition.
Line weight variation will be your next expansion into your.
I see how much more important it is for tattooing, though.
Oh yeah,
and. Yeah, I never saw it that way before. So it's something I always struggled with. It's something I still struggle with, but I'm trying to improve it every single day. Yeah.
So where do you see, like you've watched him do a handful of tattoos now, so being the person that's guiding him in one direction or another, where do you see, you just said that'll be your next thing, is like playing with weights.
I think that's the main thing we've talked about before, just before we started talking. It's like line weight, like what he's comfortable with now. You get to a certain point when you draw, you start to emulate that line weight when you start to tattoo. So if you're drawing with say a 0.7 or 0.5 0.05, 0.07, you often relate that back to the needle that you're actually using. And so some people, when they come into tattooing, they're already drawing at certain line weights. What happens is that line weight changes instantly. You want to create line weight variation because your tight tattoos, if you don't, become very flat. If they're all the same line weight, especially what we do custom tattooing and trying to do, say, color lining or other things, you create a lot of line weight variations to create tension in small tattoos, especially. And a hierarchy of the overall image and stuff. But that was what I think will change with most people. Immediately, you start to bring your natural style into tattooing. And then that has to be tempered with what you can actually do. And that is wholly created by what line weights you start with. And before we even started today, I asked him, it's like, what are you now comfortable with? Like, is overall, like, how big of a needle that you use, and then how big of a tube and stuff you use. Like, with Sarah, she uses, like, these 3/4 style grips and stuff. He uses 1 inch. He likes them much fatter and to have a
I don't know that yet.
But that's
trying to
what,
figure it out.
when you see, your printers start, I would say, they start finding their own. And I think that's what the main point is that you temper your line weight with what you're capable of, but you're capable of more because you haven't used other line weights. The second you start to actually change your linear style and your drawing style so it tempers with your tattooing, and I'm sure he's already found that, it changes dramatically. And so what happens generally then is that your line weights start to decrease back to, say, tight 5s and other things, so that you can do those quickly, get them into the skin, and then build them up quickly. And whether that be a tight 7 or 7 or 9 after that. And like I said, often what people get hung up with, and I had the same problem, is that how good is your lining when you put it in? And I think once you actually put it in, you see that you can quickly change it. But putting it is more important than sitting there and overthinking every line that you're about to put in. And hopefully he's found that too. That's when it starts to temper between your own work and your tattooing, and you find what will be often this new expansion of your own drawings, where you can go from thick to thin and use them, intermittently and still have a lot of effect and create hierarchy. And especially, and what that leads to is then creating more depth and dimension as your tattoos get larger.
Right.
So right now he's basically limited to something to the palm to the hand size tattoo. And you have to create a lot of dimension in that by only creating really unusual line weights and dimensional effects, shading and stuff like that. Yeah. But then when the tattoo gets bigger, of course,
and that's a great time to start exploring that. And you're really lucky that you had the background, that you have David, who's a line guru.
He was in graphic design or illustration before, which I started in too. And I think we have it's a familiarity how to change that into tattooing that probably helps.
And a lot of the same terminology.
Well, when you're working smaller, like you're forced to right now, and you're making those decisions on how I'm pushing lines and pulling lines and losing edges and things like that, those decisions are so much more important in a small tattoo, or they're so much more noticeable.
Fewer
they have
lines,
such a
and
huge,
those few lines have
fewer lines,
huge impact.
So every decision you make in those small tattoos has such a big impact because of the size, because of just the number of lines. And so when you're making those decisions now, it's going to make it so much easier to translate to larger pieces, because they lose importance the larger that they get.
Right. No, you're definitely right. Like, I was just working on a drawing for someone today, and I did this little heart, arrow through it, anatomical heart, and so we were talking about the size, and I ended up drawing it really big, and it became fun to draw really large, but I knew that I was going to have to shrink it by a huge percentage. And so as I'm shrinking it down in the Xerox and just really taking a hard look at it, seeing what lines I can get away with and what the lines that I've drawn in the sketch translate to, I realized that to do it at the size I want, I'm going to have to redraw the whole thing, get rid of some lines, and really be super choosy about what weights I choose, where I want to push and how, where it reads as a nice silhouette, but at the same time, the eyes are allowed to lead through, and the really important stuff gets nice bold lines to pop it out. And I can also use lines a little bit to convey a little bit of light and shadow. if I'm able to pull that off.
And I think we talked about, just for half a second, it's like if you start to enlarge or reduce, especially reduce your drawing more than 20 or 30%, you should redraw it.
Yep.
Because you are not comfortable with it at all. You have not drawn it that size, and so then you might have to do a little bit of amicable line situation. You know, you have to play with that.
Yeah, I try to make sure that whatever I'm going to tattoo on a person, especially, that whatever size that I want it at, I'll go ahead and make sure it's at that size and draw it at least in pencil once, but I'll probably do an ink version of it as well and try to get as comfortable with it at that size as possible. And if I see any problems, I know that something has to change.
Right.
Yeah, I think 20% is probably a good rule of thumb, because if you're, like you're saying, if you drop below that, it's two different problems really. Because if you drop below that, you're going to have to eliminate lines or eliminate details.
Your general line weight has decreased by 2 or 3. 30%.
Yeah, unless you know you're shrinking it down beforehand and you draw larger, which I happen to do today, but I will say that's not something I always do successfully. And by the time I shrunk it down to the size I wanted to, it's still not right. So I'm just going to have to draw it again tomorrow morning, and then we'll look at it in the afternoon and see how it goes.
It'll be fine.
Yeah. And on the opposite side of that, if you were blowing up more than 20 or 30%, then you end up with a shitty stencil because your lines get too fuzzy. So it's two completely different problems, but you definitely need to redraw. You really can only push the size so far one way or another before you really...
I'm a self-admitted, I draw about 10% too large. And so usually that small reduction is not... It does not affect the overall drawing. Yeah. I can definitely pick a needle and line weight and pick between two that will adjust to it. But 20 or 30%, you should wholly just redraw that before you put it on a person.
Yeah. Let's... We've stayed on lines quite a bit. I just looked at your third or fourth or fifth tattoo that you've done with the roller skates.
Fifth.
The other day, and
it
looks like you
Dom underscore.
Looks like you laid.
Whatever.
What is it?
I can't remember your shit.
Huh?
What? Your shit?
Shouts out to Dom.
Oh, Dom, thanks.
Dom
sits like a rock, sleeps like a rock. Jesus Christ. She fell asleep during that tattoo 3 times.
Oh, really?
That's who you want. You want somebody.
That's who you're tattooing. I lost it for a second.
Her name's
I know what
Dom.
you're talking about. Okay, gotcha. So on that tattoo, you filled a decent sized space with a color that had a lot of white in it. You had to get a solid fill of a light color.
How'd you like that? Right?
Yeah.
Man.
Wait, by the way, that was an hour.
Just that fill?
1 hour. That was an hour of filling.
What's that mean?
I'm just saying that on that tattoo, if we show it,
we'll
the lightning bolt was an entire hour of you getting it right.
What was the size of it? I didn't see. I was not there.
This long. It's in behind it. It's a 5-6 inch slash of a lightning bolt, which is a lot of overall coverage with no details,
and like kind of
nothing.
A mint green. Am I remembering right?
It was
like a baby blue teal
to a light.
Kind of?
Yeah.
Oh, so it had a gradation.
Something that was a little more green with a little more blue,
and a color lining to it that was the darkest of the.
Like it ended with sky blue, white, and a little bit.
But how long did that lightning bolt? Just the lightning bolt.
Forever.
An hour.
You haven't seen it healed yet, right?
Not healed,
not
but
yet.
she's coming back in 2.5 weeks.
Okay. What did just because that's a tricky thing for anyone to put in a solid color that has a lot of white in it. A solid pastel color is very
on a fade.
On a fade, yeah. It's like
I did do a slight gradient.
It tests your patience. It tests you in every way. I think. What do you?
I agree.
Yeah. What do you? How did you feel about making?
Well, approaching it, I did know that since I was doing a larger area, my gradients that I chose, I picked 2 that were pretty close to each other. And so it's just a very, very slight fade. And so I knew that if my tones were a little bit off going top to bottom, because the height was so high, it wouldn't be as noticeable. It was just like one tiny little shade difference with a little bit of color cast. Something a little more green to a little more blue.
Which is smart. Yeah. Have them wholly mixed, ready to go.
Yeah.
Don't try to make them up in the tube or in the front of your tubing at all. If you try to readjust for every one of those, especially on a long feel like that, you will fucking
fuck up.
Eat it.
Yeah. No way around that.
that was the first thing I did approaching it. But then going into it, there really was, I had a time constraint. I was supposed to be done by 6. It was 5 at that point. I probably didn't actually start that stuff until after 5, so David was kind enough to let me go a little past while he worked on a consultation.
No, my appointment was there at 6. That's a whole other thing.
Anyway, David
The
was
thing is that he needed to do it. She was willing to sit, and you don't rarely have people like that where
Correct.
He could have
Dom
wholly
sat like
not
a
done that
rock.
lightning bolt. He could have switched it, just done the skates, and that would have been a second thing that he would have done in another 2 weeks. Unfortunately, you would have to wait 2 to 3 weeks to do that. You have a client who's willing to sit. So,
But I will say my biggest problem during my first pass was, I think, and that's only because you said it and it made all the sense to me after, was my angle. I knew that, and we talked about it, but there were some grain changes, and I found them. But I was trying to just make consistent motion, so I just went through. And I saw that it wasn't covering exactly the way I wanted to, but at least I wanted to be consistent and make sure that if I was going to be approaching the skin in a certain way, it would all have the same, I don't know what you would call it, but...
effect.
Yeah. Same effect, and
And
to
we
make
call
sure
it,
that I was
honestly,
hitting the skin consistently
I
so it
always
didn't get
say,
too beat up.
remind yourself of the angle to the dangle. And for that, it's a weird way. I know it's a weird, but he went through one pass, just kept going. I was like, ignore it. Wait till it heals. It was a teal color. Which
I didn't want to beat the skin up too
We've
much.
talked a little bit about it, like when blood starts to come through and it'll actually neutralize the color that's there. So it'll turn it gray or other tones.
It greens up, I see a lot.
You
Yeah, it's
cannot
really
see
weird.
it. So with the blue, light blue, green,
It
teal.
almost grays out back to another flesh tone.
Yeah.
Right. Go ahead.
But so I made my first pass, and it wasn't as smooth as I wanted to. And I knew that my angle, well, I didn't know it until later, but my angle was wrong because I was having, I wouldn't say an issue, but I couldn't figure out how to hold the machine at the right angle without hitting her other leg. And now that I think about it, I could have moved her other leg if I wanted to, and I just wanted to keep her comfortable because she'd been sitting for so long. But the back of the machine kept bumping her other leg, so I went and increased the angle, made it a little more steep. And because of the direction that I was going in and the direction of the grain, it just wasn't accepting. And so I ended up going back over it, and I was really afraid that I was going to, I wouldn't be able to get the colors just right and to get them as smooth as I wanted. But because the two values I chose were so close to each other, at the end of the session, it looked okay. We'll have to see how it heals.
Yeah. That's what you bumped it back before it got irritated. You left it alone and went through the entire piece, and then as a touch-up look through, went back and bumped up the actual shaded value between the dark and the light, and that's all you really had to do. And I can, and the other thing I asked him to do is like cut an angle on there at the very end, which is just with the shader, as I think you did it with just the shader, but trying to reline an edge with your shader is it's basically asking your apprentice to get a little tricky with this fucking shader. But it went in perfect.
I mean, I've seen you do it before. I know how to do it. I think my main concern with that is because I did that very, very light bloodline, like quarter drop gray wash or whatever it was. It looked a little darker,
before color lining.
Because I've been working on Amy's tattoo and I've seen how it's healed now. When I outlined, I did another lightning bolt and something else, and it was like a magenta to hot pink or light soft pink. I outlined the whole thing in the top color and then did the fade on the way down, but the line work stayed the same value and same color. And so when I first did it, it looked a lot darker just because I had hit it with that liner and had done more damage to that skin. It was a little more red. But as I've seen it heal, it's evened out to the exact same color.
Right.
And so when I did that light wash, I'm guessing, fingers crossed, that the very light wash that I put in will not show. Hopefully.
It shouldn't. And when you reclaim it with a color that's at least like a 50, 60, 70%, it reclaims
There's a
that
lot of
gray
pigment in
wash
there,
line.
so.
And which is unusual for Dom's, she's very, very pale. And so trying to create a lot of contrast and waiting for the blood to actually, stop bleeding and getting back into it later, I think is a real, it's tricky for people that first start. They think that they should sit there and just go back over and over and over. wait a minute or two. Wait till it heals and then reclaim it. It'll heal a lot faster, a lot better. And by the time it was done, what did you think?
I think it looked pretty good. I think none of the skin looked way too beat up.
I just saw a photo, but I thought it looked nice.
For a fourth or fifth tattoo on a person, I think it was a damn fucking good tattoo.
Yeah.
Well, I've gotten some compliments from some friends.
Well, let it heal, and that's the only way you learn. You have to see it heal.
Wow, that's solid.
And on those one sitting tattoos, if you ever find yourself uncomfortable with that gray line, especially on pale people like that, you can just line that thing with water. Just get in there as long as you're going to finish
That's about what he did. It was definitely a drop off of water. Yeah. And the other thing is, like, how long did you think that actually took you?
For the
tattoo overall,
the whole tattoo,
the entire tattoo, your work time. How long do you think, as far as an apprenticeship?
That I had the needle running.
That's right.
Probably had it running for at least 3.5, 4 hours.
That's what I would guess.
I
think
I don't think I took that many breaks. I tried to keep moving.
I think that's about the max that an apprentice should really do. At that point, 3-4 hour tattoo.
I'm tired after a 4 hour tattoo.
But we were there for 6 hours, 15 minutes from start to finish, setting up this. I'm still messed up.
Right.
The next day, I was just like, "Oh, what's wrong with me? The body hurts.
It's exhausting sometimes.
Back's messed up."
I think the average person doesn't realize it's like you're sitting in a chair. You think people have told me that, oh, you just sit there, you just like trace and whatever. And like, yeah. Why do I have fucking hand cramps? Why does my back hurt? Why the fuck do I feel like I've fought with somebody for 7 hours?
And I know that just from drawing marathons back in college and then doing this stuff now. It's a huge mental exercise, and at the same time, it's physical because every single little movement matters, and your speed matters.
I tell the average person, it's like, hold your arms like this for 7 hours and see if you can fucking do it. You know what I can do? I can do that because I can sit there and tattoo on somebody for this long, for that. And I have no problem with it. You do it. You try it and see what happens.
It's exhausting.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely exhausting.
You draw me something.
You draw me.
Internet.
What?
Internet.
YouTube.
Sorry. So you're 5 or 6 months
by the way.
in. It's your first New Year's as a tattooer. Are you excited so far? Everything you thought it was going to be? Being a tattooer?
Nothing I thought it was going to be.
Nothing you thought it was going to be?
Too much work. I don't like it. It's a lot of hard work, but I do know, I mean, even already, like, there are gratifying aspects of it, and it's just getting used to it. And as I get more used to it, hopefully I'll enjoy it that much more. Like, of all the jobs I've had, there are some moments that are just way more fun than any other job I can think of.
Yeah.
And hopefully I can maximize on those and just have more and more of them.
I have to admit, too, I did ask you this earlier, but it's like, but for the average person, when you start working, what kind of tube and assembly did you like? You've noticed over the time how you've picked, we have a lot of different to pick from, but for small, I mean, I have huge hands, and so I've noticed you have to barrel down, you pick a different type. You take a different needle and stuff like that. What do you like?
There aren't a lot of people that use those small tubes that you use.
I like them though.
I know you do, but people that have been tattooing since the 80s tattoo with
They're
those.
bitches.
No, tattoo like...
did I?
Yeah, like those. With those 5/8 or whatever they are.
That's exactly. That's how you're supposed to do it.
Yeah, no, I know.
Wait.
Most
isn't
people,
that how you're supposed to do it?
90% of tattooers use big grips now. Almost everybody.
It reminds me of like when I was in kindergarten. Like I can remember back because that's 40 fucking years ago.
Right.
But big crayon. Sure. I mean, it does. It takes down the rotation and stuff like that. And I think he's actually found that. For shading especially, a bigger grip really does work really well. And I think for hand grip and stuff where you can actually affect the end of it. But I'm talking in, his. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, I did watch the podcast most recently that I was featured in.
Yeah.
Which one? Were you naked?
No, it was just one where we were talking about him. We shot it a couple months ago.
Podcast.
Okay.
I don't remember it. I haven't. It just came out and I haven't watched it yet.
Right.
But what did you learn from
But
it?
so we talked
criticizing
about line weights, and like when I was drawing with pencils a whole lot, I started off with those sumo grips. I was using the .9s,
Yep.
and I love those sumo grip pencils because they have that big triangular rubberized grip.
Yeah.
And most recently, I've gotten myself a tiny little Pentel that's very similar to a repeatograph but cheaper, and I've been using that a little bit more. It's a little bit of a smaller grip. It's a little bit tighter.
Those
And
are
since then-
07s, though, aren't those?
a little 07, but I'm talking about the actual
itself.
diameter of the
Oh,
pencil
I
and the
see.
grip
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
So I've been using something a little bit narrower, and it does give me a little bit of control. But with the size of my hands, it's something that's a little bit uncomfortable. I do kind of clutch pencils a little bit harder and pens a little bit harder, which is why I like the bigger grip, because I'll sit there and wear bruises and calluses into my fingers super easy on a thinner grip, especially if
Yeah.
it's a repeatograph. It's something that's nice and knurled. I will rip my fingers up on.
I did the same thing. I did that eventually, and I caused
And now you got
calluses.
that good callus now.
Yeah.
But
Good
I don't
callus.
have that yet. And so I've been
That
using
good
the
callus.
plastic Pentels.
Scott has
and
that
I've been
good
getting more
callus.
used to it. And I see where you get more control out of it. But when it comes to using a machine itself, you've got a finger length and a hand strength that I think that I just don't have at this point. And so I noticed that when you're tattooing and using those thinner, like, is it a 5/8 or is it a half
think it's a
inch?
It's less than half. It's a 5
Less than a half?
It,
Okay.
No, that'd be
No, wait,
over.
that'd
It's
be
got to be half.
More than
What, like
half
7/16?
inch to
I don't
5/8,
know.
something like that. I
They're
forget what they
thin.
are.
7/16,
7/16, maybe.
9/16.
I don't know. It's small. It's only
17,
only
30
old people use them.
seconds,
Only
I don't
old
know.
tattooers use
Yeah,
them.
old bastards.
Anyway, I noticed that
Not all.
your
I
machine
don't. All of them like that.
hovers
My 7s are bigger
over
than
your
that.
knuckles and over
Yeah,
your hand a little
yeah,
bit.
that's true.
You can swing it around a little bit, and that's something that I don't have the strength to do. But
That's
because
what I'm going to teach you to do.
I feel like because of the
tell you where
size
it
of my
starts.
fingers, it's a little bit easier for me to try to have the back of the machine rest on my hand, and so I'm sitting there using that for support to hold the rest of the machine.
Actually, that's one thing that we have found. I haven't mentioned this, but maybe we haven't mentioned it. When he's doing 7s, especially 7 mags, he often finds using his hand a little more easier than actually using his fingers. And that's one thing that there is a permutation. You can use your hand to actually make the motion, or use your finger to use the motion.
Yeah.
And
With the bigger grip, it becomes more of a whole hand.
More of a
motion.
whole hand, yeah.
Right. And
I work
because I
from my
don't use
shoulder
those,
and
I
elbow.
see him doing it all the time, and
That's
I try
how
to
I'm used
remind
drawing
him.
is shoulder, elbow,
I do. I
wrist.
try to remind
Yeah.
him, use your fingers, when in fact he could probably use his hand just as easy. But when I see it does a little like,
Yeah.
And most of my drawing, just from everything I've done since I was a kid, was more from the shoulder or elbow or wrist. And I'm
Yeah.
used to bracing certain
which it
ways
should
and
be.
swinging.
Yeah,
And I'm
It's-
not used to so much coordination from just my fingers.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I've had jobs where I've done that before, but as far as drawing goes, it's always been a full arm thing.
Yeah.
Even for the tiniest little details, it's not just fingers, it's always wrist.
And that's what we've tried to talk about, is like the dimension of the angle to the set of the needle itself, the facing of the needle, and that angle to the person is the most important part. And how you achieve and how you achieve that can be really different. I often am trying to get him now into learning the trick of like trying to turn a needle in the tube itself in your palm or in your fingers, so that you could turn the angle, and so you don't have to turn your hand to a certain angle.
Yeah.
And I've tried that a few times here and there.
Right.
But I feel like at this point I just don't have it too smooth, and I don't feel like I can confidently keep that rotation up while turning it with my fingers.
Yeah.
And so it's just, if I can't make it smooth, I'm hesitant to do it.
But you understand the principle.
Right.
Is what I'm hoping. That's
45.
3301 is a pair to 1101, I think.
Yeah. We're 45 minutes in.
Oh.
So I hear.
My bad.
That's all you get.
That's all you guys get.
Whatever.
We have a party going on out here.
It's a huge party.
Huge party.
Happy New Year. Jimmy Tightpants now available on
He's taking appointments. He's at makingmamaproud.com.
Making
Are you
Mama
on
Proud.
line? Are you on the website?
I don't know. Nobody tells me anything.
You are. You can
am?
see him on Instagrams
you
off
kidding
of makingmamaproud.com.
What's your
That's
Instagram?
true. Mine is I'm a cat lady.
I'm a cat.
IMA_CATLADY.
Wait,
And
do
he
you have
is
the
a
small
cat
cat on
lady.
you? Do you
Do I
have the
a
baby
small-
cat?
I don't have the baby cat.
Fuck
I've just got
off.
this cat,
that
my
cat.
no
That's
regrets
not the
cat.
same thing.
Who is this? At Tattoos by Lauren. Lorin. She made this patch.
Nice.
It helped cats I didn't even know, and she wrote me a nice little card, so that was really cool.
Kiss a
good.
cat.
Yeah, love your cat today. Happy New Year's to you and your kitties.
I mean, do we need to say anything else?
I don't think so.
If
Thanks
you
for
have any
coming out.
questions, if you have any problems, if we're going to be in Austin,
January there,
15,
wherever
13,
this- wherever
17.
Sean puts it when he edits this, right
we will
there.
be in
Another cat
Huntsville,
right here.
Alabama in February.
Huntsville, Alabama in February.
Come
Thanks for
say
this cat,
hello,
boo-boo.
shake a hand. If you have any questions or whatever, let's go have a drink.
Let's do it. I don't know anything about Huntsville. We're gonna
Happy
have a
New
blast.
Year. Shoot
Happy
some
New Year,
fireworks
everybody.
off.
Happy New Year,
Thank
everybody.
you guys.
All right.
TattooImprovement.com.
Thank you so much for having me.
100%.
Thank you so much
That's
for
it.
having me.
Yes, sir. Thanks, everybody.
Good night. Be safe.